Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into the most talked about topics and surface with truly insightful takeaways.
Great to be here.
And speaking of talked about, how is it July 2025? And we're already buzzing about the 2028 U.S. presidential election. It feels incredibly early.
It really does. But, it's almost a testament to the relentless nature of the political cycle now. It simply never pauses.
Yeah, it feels like it's starting even earlier this time around. What are the key signs we're seeing right now that point to this early maneuvering?
There are quite a few, actually.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the unfolding dynamics of the 2028 Democratic presidential primary. We'll look at who's making those early moves, the strategies they seem to be using, and maybe what the 2024 election results tell us about, well, the American voter today.
And for this, we've pulled from a pretty wide range of sources. We've got stuff from TikTok Insights, believe it or not, Wikipedia entries on past elections, campaign finance,
Right.
analyses from places like MSNBC, AP News, PBS, and various political commentary sites too.
Our mission really is to pull out the most important bits of information, the key takeaways, to give you a shortcut to understanding this very early landscape for the next cycle.
Yeah, trying to make sense of the noise already starting.
So let's unpack this then. It's 2025. Jockeying for 2028 is, well, clearly underway. What's really striking to me is just how visible these moves are, months, even years out.
What's fascinating here is that potential candidates aren't just thinking about it. They're actively doing things.
Right.
We're seeing California Governor Gavin Newsom and Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego already making these strategic visits, key swing states.
Oh, really? So they're already on the ground.
Yeah, and Newsom, get this, he's even been explicitly referred to as a presidential candidate at some stops. That's about as direct a signal as you can get this early.
Wow. Okay. And it's not just the usual suspects from the coasts, right?
No, not at all. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is openly saying he's considering a 2028 bid. And he's been touring South Carolina, specifically focusing, it seems, on building ties within the black community there.
Interesting. And what about the progressive wing?
Well, California Representative Ro Khanna, who's more aligned with, say, the Bernie Sanders wing, he's already targeting union members and black voters in early states too, like New Hampshire. They're really not wasting any time.
They're hitting the ground running immediately.
Pretty much. And that focus on those early primary states, it's absolutely crucial. The DNC calendar for 2028, well, it's expected to change from 2024.
Right. There's that whole fight for first in the nation again.
Exactly. You got Nebraska, New Hampshire, Nevada, all vying for that top spot. And even though there were attempts last cycle, in 2024, to strip New Hampshire of its traditional first place.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, candidates like Josh Shapiro are still showering it with attention.
Hmm.
Which just signals its power. It's still there in the primary process.
It really is like a political game of king of the hill for that first spot, isn't it?
It really is. Huge momentum implications.
So, okay, who else is sort of in the mix at this super early stage? Is there any polling yet?
There is, actually. An Emerson College polling poll, pretty recent, suggests Pete Buttigieg, the former transportation secretary, is, maybe surprisingly, leading potential Democratic nominees right now. About 16% support.
16%? Wow. And that's ahead of Kamala Harris.
Yep, she's at 13% in that same poll. Which, makes you wonder what might be behind Buttigieg's early showing. Name recognition. Something else.
Definitely something to watch. Who else did that poll mention?
Well, it had Gavin Newsom at 12%, and then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and Josh Shapiro, both falling around 7%.
Okay.
And beyond that specific poll, in broader political chatter, you hear other names being floated. Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Minnesota, Senator Chris Murphy, Connecticut, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, even Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs. There's a pretty wide field being discussed.
But it's also worth noting who's saying no, right? At least for now.
Absolutely. We've seen public statements from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Michelle Obama, and Colorado Governor Jared Polis, all saying they're either not running or, not currently considering it.
Right. And that itself tells you something, doesn't it? About their own calculations, maybe how they see the landscape shaping up.
For sure. It's not just who's putting their hat in the ring, but who's deliberately taking it out. That can also define the contours of the race early on.
Okay, so this brings us to something really interesting, I think. It's not just who's running, but how they're running. the playbook seems to be changing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A huge shift, maybe one of the biggest, is the rise of podcasts as a campaign tool.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Right, you see politicians popping up everywhere now.
Exactly. Potential 2028 contenders are basically following President Trump's lead from his 2024 campaign.
Okay.
He was on podcasts all the time, trying to reshape his image, appeal to different groups, especially younger men.
And Andy Bashir mentioned this specifically.
Yeah, he highlighted it, said something like, just 3 years ago, podcasts wouldn't have even been, on the radar for this kind of political outreach. It's a whole different ballgame in terms of direct communication.
And it's not just the platforms changing, it's the message too, right? Driven by, well, some tough lessons from 2024.
That last election, it really highlighted a significant demographic shift for Democrats. They lost ground with white working-class voters. We knew that was happening, but maybe more surprisingly, populist Republicans actually expanded their support among non-white working-class voters. Hispanics, yes, but also a growing share of African-American men.
So why does it matter so much for you listening?
Well, it's critical because it hints at this potential realignment, where maybe working-class identity, kind of regardless of race, is increasingly tuning into these populist messages, these grievances. It forces both parties to rethink their traditional base, right?
And connecting that back, a key factor reportedly in Kamala Harris's 2024 loss was the impact of messaging around, well, cultural issues.
Yeah, that Trump campaign ad, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. Apparently it was seen everywhere, came up spontaneously in focus groups. It really seemed to shape opinions among swing voters, became like a shorthand reason not to choose her for some.
And there are surveys backing this up.
Yeah, surveys from late 2023 indicated working-class voters, broadly, want Democrats to, and I'm quoting here, get tougher on illegal immigration, prioritize economic growth, spend tax dollars more efficiently, and also stand up to woke progressives. That's the sentiment being picked up.
So that suggests this real hunger, maybe, for candidates to move beyond the sort of standard status quo talk, that typical policy-heavy party line stuff, and instead embrace something more, I don't know, populist, a worker-first progressive message that maybe hits harder on economic anxieties, this desire for real change.
That seems to be the takeaway. And research actually backs this up. Studies suggest voters tend to evaluate candidates more positively when they use anti-establishment rhetoric.
Like what kind of rhetoric?
Things like being anti-party politics, anti-corruption, drain the swamp type messaging, rather than pro-establishment talk.
Okay, that makes sense.
But what's really fascinating is studies show pretty weak and kind of inconsistent evidence that voters actually prefer inexperienced candidates over experienced ones.
Oh, interesting. So it's the talk more than the resume.
It seems like the rhetoric itself, that tone of challenging the system, matters more. The performance of being anti-establishment might actually overshadow traditional qualifications now, which, really challenges how we think about leadership in this populist moment.
So with all these shifts in strategy, these new tactics, what does this actually mean for the candidates trying to connect with you, the voter, right now?
Well, campaign strategists are really hammering this home. Candidates need to define a clear, concise, powerful why. Why are you running? It helps build their brand, helps them resonate.
Like a mission statement?
Sort of, yeah. And they have to decide pretty early. Are we trying to energize our base, get them fired up, or are we trying to persuade those swing voters and then frame the message based on that win number, the actual vote count they think they need?
But all these strategies, defining the why, targeting voters, it all rests on, well, money, right? Campaign finance. Let's touch on that briefly.
Yeah, it's foundational. Campaign finance law, it's notoriously complex. It regulates money, obviously, but also anything of value given to influence federal elections.
And it's not just direct checks, right? There's dark money, super PACs.
Exactly. And that kind of early financial backing, or the strategic use of those outside groups, can signal serious intent long before anyone officially declares. It shapes perceptions.
And there are strict rules about foreign money, too, especially now.
Oh, absolutely critical. Foreign nationals are strictly, completely prohibited from making contributions or donations. To parties, to campaigns, doesn't matter.
And that includes coordinating messages.
Yes. The ban extends to coordinated communications with campaigns, too. And just to be crystal clear, the candidates themselves, they are explicitly prohibited from soliciting, accepting, or receiving any contributions from foreign nationals. It's about protecting the integrity of U.S. elections.
Got it. Okay, so let's look at some of the key personalities we mentioned and how they seem to be approaching this early phase. Gavin Newsom, you said, is being pretty aggressive.
Yeah, positioning himself as a front runner, it looks like, by being always on offense. That
Right.
seems to be his strategy.
And how does someone like Andy Bashir contrast with that?
Well, Bashir seems to be carving out a different niche, particularly on social issues. He's notably vetoed some anti-LGBTQ plus bills in Kentucky, and he's emphasized that, different sports leagues can figure out fairness for transgender athletes.
Hmm. And how does that compare to Newsom?
It puts him in a bit of contrast, actually, with some of Newsom's past stated positions. So you see them trying to appeal to maybe different parts of the Democratic electorate even this early.
While Bashir is doing that, what about the progressive wing? You mentioned Kana earlier.
Right. And there's even talk, whispers about a potential Sanders AOC ticket for 2028, reflecting that ongoing push for left-wing populism.
And Bernie Sanders himself is still very active.
Very. He's continued to argue against U.S. military intervention abroad. He recently introduced legislation to block federal money for force against Iran, and he's accused Israel of striking unprovoked. He's keeping those issues front and center.
And AOC and others like her, they're winning big in their districts, right?
They are. AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Jasmine Crockett. They've often won by large margins, which suggests there's definitely a solid constituency for their approach, that fight when you orient your power with people idea.
Yeah.
Focusing on delivering material benefit for people.
So a strong progressive base exists and wants to be heard. Whether a candidate is seen as more centrist or progressive, whether they focus on policy details or that populist message, there's one thing that keeps coming up in the analysis: charisma.
Ah, yes. The X factor.
Right. Lots of sources emphasize how important it is. They point to figures like Barack Obama, having that ability to work a crowd to really connect.
Absolutely. And even now, you hear mentions of Josh Shapiro being a strong orator. Pete Buttigieg gets called an eloquent genius, a really sharp speaker. That personal connection, it just seems paramount for voters.
Can't fake charisma, I guess.
It's tough. Finally, though, we can't really talk about 2028 without acknowledging the elephant in the room, or maybe the president in the White House, Donald Trump and the Republican landscape.
True. He won in 2024 and actually improved his vote totals in swing states compared to 2020, right? By nearly 1 million votes.
That's right. A significant improvement. Now, while some of his allies have floated the idea, maybe wishful thinking, that he should run for a third term in 2028.
Which isn't constitutionally allowed, but okay.
Right. Trump himself has publicly stated, quote, "I'll be an 8-year president. I'll be a 2-term president," which seems to imply he wouldn't seek another term.
Okay. But his impact, his style, the issues he focused on, that looms large, doesn't it?
Immensely. The fact that his direct populist appeal on things like the economy and immigration resonated so strongly, even with all the controversies swirling around him.
Yeah, thinking back, rhetoric on Mexican immigrants, the Muslim ban idea, Access Hollywood, tax returns, attacking judges.
Right. Despite all that, his core message connected. That Make America Great Again slogan became iconic for a reason. And that's a powerful lesson, maybe, for Democrats, about prioritizing a clear message that hits those common folks' concerns, not just relying on traditional political arguments.
And even within the Republican Party, there was significant opposition back in 2016, but he still won.
Yeah, high-profile figures like Lindsey Graham, Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney condemned him, but his base stuck with him and grew. The internal party dynamics on both sides are just as complex as the general election, always shaping the field.
So, wrapping this up for today's deep dive, we've seen how the 2028 Democratic primary is already, surprisingly dynamic. It's being shaped by these key lessons from 2024, shifting voter preferences, and definitely the strategic use of new platforms like podcasts.
And the emphasis seems to be shifting, right? Towards specific resonant messaging, maybe a more populist approach rather than just leaning on, a long political resume.
Exactly.
So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. Given this clear shift in voter priorities we've talked about, especially that focus on issues like immigration, economic growth, and the undeniable impact of cultural debates,
Right.
how much will the Democratic Party need to sort of reshuffle the deck and cut a new deal, as one source put it, a new deal on its core beliefs, its policy commitments, to build a coalition that can last beyond 2028?
That's a huge question. What might that reexamination even look like? And how would all the different factions within the party, the progressives, the centrists, navigate that?
It really gets to the fundamental direction of the party going forward. Something to definitely keep an eye on as this very, very early race continues to unfold.